Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions, soul mentoring, and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminatingsouls.com. But for now, the angels and I are here to help co-create a beautiful place where you can rest and relax and perhaps drift off to sleep, or we can simply keep you company for the next hour. This is a really easy podcast to listen to because you don't really have to pay attention. Sometimes it can be helpful to have some comforting white noise in the background of a loving voice just rambling to you as you go about your day. And this podcast is born of two of my favorite forms of self-care: connecting with the angels and listening to a sleep podcast. I first started developing a relationship with sleep podcasts about 8 years ago. I had been searching through the podcast charts. I hadn't really been a podcast listener. I think the first podcast I really listened to regularly was when the West Wing Weekly came out, because I love the show West Wing. My husband does too. And then I was kind of wondering what other podcasts were out there. It seemed like a lot of the people that I loved podcasts, and I didn't really have a relationship with listening to them aside from West Wing Weekly. And somehow I came across the podcast Sleep With Me, which has a great title, right? It's very intriguing. Well, it's like, I wonder what this is about. And the show notes at the time said that it was a podcast to help you fall asleep. And I wondered how they did that. And so I started listening a few times. I had been traveling to a wonderful event called Soul Camp, which at the time was a sleepaway camp for adults that was spiritually based, and I was one of their teachers. And I was just in a different sleeping environment, and the bed wasn't as comfortable, and there was a lot of ambient noise that I wasn't used to. And so I put on some episodes of the Sleep With Me podcast and found that it helped me drift off. Because before that I had fallen asleep with the television on. But this was a little different, and I found that I really fell in love with it. And I fell in love with that specific podcast. Its host, Andrew Ackerman, would share personal stories and reflections. He would go over TV episodes. And it felt like I was hanging out with a friend. It felt intimate. I didn't feel like somebody was talking at me. I felt like I was in conversation with someone. And I loved the intimacy of it. And then I found my way to other sleep podcasts. One of my favorites is The Sleepy Bookshelf, where its host Elizabeth reads different books from beginning to the end. Another one is called Sleepy. Another is called Get Sleepy. I'm listening to one called Drift Off right now. And as I was falling in love with this genre of sleep podcasts, I thought I would love to make one as well. Because I'm a big believer in having more voices in the world that share with love. And so Sleepy Bedtime Blessings was born. And I really didn't think it through very much. I just was inspired to do it, and I did it, and not really realizing that my audience that I already had for Illuminating Souls, either they had no idea what a sleep podcast was, why would they? And many of them didn't even listen to sleep podcasts. So here I had created this broadcast, and I had to teach people how to use it. That's often how I co-create. I really don't think things through. I prefer to jump when the inspiration is high, and I figure out the details later. So I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just my co-creation style, because I have the habit of overthinking things. And if I wait until things make sense, I'll never do it. So we are 180 plus episodes in to this broadcast, and here's what you can expect. We'll be together for about an hour, and that's because when I'm listening to a sleep podcast as a listener, I prefer episodes that are an hour long. If they're shorter than that, I feel pressure to fall asleep, and that does not help me drift off. The first 15 or 20 minutes or so, we'll have some spiritually based conversation, and I'll bring in the angels. And then the next 40 minutes is story time. And story time can be anything from flipping through the pages of an old TV guide, sharing old recipes with you, sharing stories from my life. I switch it up. It depends on what I'm inspired to share. But the idea being that I get to keep you company, whether you're drifting off to sleep or whether you're going for a walk or driving to work, whatever you're doing. I'm going to be a loving voice in the world that is here for you. And because the angels are here, this broadcast is also infused with a lot of love for you, which my hope is you will be able to feel or sense or just imagine that it is so. So if you are preparing for bed, I invite you to get comfortable in whatever way you can, to the best of your ability. I love sleeping under a lot of blankets with lots of pillows surrounding me. And I pull the blankets over my head, and I put my earbuds in, and I pick an episode of a sleep podcast to listen to. And then I get ready to drift off. And so whatever your sleep rhythm is, if you are preparing for sleep, I invite you to cozy on up and snuggle on in. And if this is your waking hours, then I just invite you to just take a few deep breaths in and just allow yourself to become present to the love that is here for you. And I'm going to invite the angels to be here with us. They are already here, but I absolutely love the ritual of sharing them with you. So I'm going to take a nice deep breath in, and I invite you to do so as well, as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. I ask that you infuse this broadcast with waves of love and comfort and healing in service to each of our beloveds listening to this message. Angels, I ask that you bring in a lightness of spirit, help to lift our energy field, our thoughts, our emotions into brighter realms, helping to clear that which feels like a burden. Helping to clear away that which is not ours. Helping us to see the beauty in our lives in the world and in ourselves, especially so. And dear ones, just take some nice deep breaths in, allowing the love of your angels to meet you where you are. Your angels have known you since before you were born. They have loved you and love you every breath you take. And they know who you really are. They see you. They understand you. You don't have to become anything more than you are already. You are a beloved of this universe. And just allow yourself to be loved right now. It's one of the things that I appreciate so much about connecting with the angels is we don't have to heal ourselves or become more exalted than we already are in order to be worthy of the love. The love is here, just like sunlight. We never think that we have to become worthy of sunlight. It simply exists. And we bathe in it. We participate with it. It exists always. And that is how divine love is. And so just breathe. You know, it's interesting. I find the energy these days to be a bit harder to navigate. I share this in case you're finding it to be this way as well. I find it takes more energy to stay balanced than it used to. At least that's my perception. I think I tend to look upon the past with rose-colored glasses of the good old days. I don't know if that's always the way. The difficult times seem to even out for me when I look at the past. But right now it feels like it takes a lot of energy to stay centered and balanced. And I've shared this metaphor with you before, but I will share it again because it always returns to me when I come into judgment of my own process. There is a form of exercise, I guess. I say this not being an exercise expert in any way, shape, or form, that there are these balance boards. And the intention is to stay balanced on this wobbly board. And it is supposed to strengthen your core. And I think that's how life is right now. It doesn't feel like we're on a solid foundation. It feels like we are on this wobbly board, and a lot of our energy goes to staying balanced. And perhaps at the end of the day, there isn't a lot left over for other things, like intentions and co-creating dreams, and that's just my experience anyways. Maybe all of you who are listening are feeling bright and shiny and co-creating with a lot of gusto. I find I'm just in this quiet space. And it's a quiet space in which I feel very contented. I don't feel driven to do more. It's interesting. Some of you know I've been designing my own angel oracle deck. And it's finally ready. And the next step is to put it on my website and maybe record some videos letting people know that it's available. And I don't know why that feels so hard right now. It's not hard. I could probably do it in an hour or two. I mean, it's not a lot of heavy lifting. But I find that my perception of how much energy it will take feels magnified right now. I share this with you because maybe you're experiencing this too. Maybe there is something that you have the desire to do that you think, well, I could get that done pretty easily, but yet there's a lag. It's like we're in a pause. And right now, as I record this, we are in Mercury retrograde, which is notorious for this kind of energy. It's like there's a 5-second delay or something. There's a delay where something is out of sync. If any of you remember, when we used to watch movies or TV and the soundtrack would be out of sync and the lips would be moving and the sound would not be synchronized. To me, life feels a lot like that right now. So I use my energy to stay balanced. And I do what I can. And I focus on the beauty of the moment, the sweetness that surrounds me. And I let it be okay that I am where I am. Oops, someone's dog's barking, so if you hear that, I'm really sorry. It's early morning. And I think some dogs in the neighborhood are having a conversation. But so I do what I can, and I do judge myself sometimes, but I try to be loving and remember that life is long and I might feel differently tomorrow. It might be that tomorrow or a week from Thursday, I'm going to have all the energy and inspiration that I need to co-create. And for now, it's like I'm floating on a very sweet river, just allowing life to move me where I am. I'm sorry, wait, the dogs are really going at it now. I'm going to pause for just a second. And of course, as soon as I paused, they stopped. Good manifesting, everyone. So, I invite you to take a deep breath and bless where you are, even if it is not where you want to be. Just bless this moment, and if you're having a hard time blessing this moment, we'll invite the angels in to bless this moment on your behalf. Just to take a breath in and feel this beautiful divine light all around you, infusing you with inspiration, healing, love, compassion, goodness, and restfulness. You are so deeply loved in this world, just as you are. You are precious. And you are filled with light, even if it doesn't feel that way. Take another deep breath in, allowing your angels to love you right now. And we are so deeply grateful for the gift of you. We are so deeply grateful for your beautiful heart, for the sweetness of your spirit, and for the goodness you carry in this world. And so, my beautiful friends, I invite you to get comfortable again, just stretching a little bit, moving your body into this energy field a little bit. Whenever you're ready, you can drift off. And I'm going to share some stories with you. We're going to head on over into Storytime. And so, if you have been paying attention, you might have realized that I posted 2 replays for the past 2 episodes. I had every intention of recording new material for you, but I would sit in front of my microphone. Sometimes I wouldn't even get the microphone plugged in. I would sit at my desk in the early morning, and then I would open my computer, and I would fall into the rabbit hole that is the internet and search for things and research and do nothing, basically. And I wouldn't record an episode. And then I was going to record an episode about cottage cheese, which we'll talk about in a minute. Not cottage cheese, about what the episode was going to be about and how I got there. And then I realized there was no joy in it for me. And so that was one morning that the episode never got completely recorded, and I decided I didn't want to do it. So I've been in this weird, foggy place of not quite knowing what I was going to talk about or read about in the episode. And then I was going to record a new episode a few days ago, but it was garbage day. And I got a late start, and every time I went to record, the garbage trucks were coming by. And so I thought, I'll put up replays for you guys because maybe there are episodes you hadn't heard yet. But for this episode, I have promised myself that I would record new material for you, so here we are. So here's my plan for Storytime, which is I don't really have a plan. I'm going to do some randoms for you. And I've done these kinds of episodes before where I'm just going to share with you little snippets of life, the things I want to talk about. And since it's supposed to be a sleep podcast, the bar isn't really, really high, that I have a narrative that weaves together well, but I find that most of the time, the narratives somehow weave together once I dive into them. So let me start with what brought up the cottage cheese episode that never got recorded. One of the things that I have really been enjoying, much to my surprise, has been attending estate sales. I used to go to estate sales when I lived in Los Angeles years ago. Not that I was looking for anything in particular, but back then you could go into these beautiful homes in Beverly Hills that I would have never had an opportunity to see, and wander around and buy some little tchotchkes or scarves or something. And I still have some lovely treasures from those times. I have some scarves that I bought, and in my imagination, the woman who had owned them was a ballerina. I don't know that she actually was. I just seem to recall there were ballet books around the house. I have a pretty little glass dish that I bought. And so I used to do that, and then I stopped for a really long time. But recently, I've gotten back into it. And it's become a little bit like a sporting event. So the bigger estate sales, as I have discovered, the goal is to get there early in the morning, an hour or two or three before they start. And often there will be a sign-up list. And you put your name on the sign-up list, and they call you into the home in the order you're on the list. So last weekend, I found out there was an estate sale in Martinez, which is about 10 miles away from here. And it looked like it had been an estate sale of someone who is a collector of many things. And one of the things they had collections of were old cookbooks. And as some of you know, I started collecting old cookbooks for this podcast because I love to read old cookbooks with you. And so I saw that, and I knew I had to go. And not that I thought there was going to be a mad rush on the old cookbooks, but I decided to get there early in the morning. So I think the sale started at 9, and I was there around 7:30. I was number 8 on the list, which was great because it meant that I would get to go in there in the first wave. They had these small shopping baskets, like you would take and, carry on your arm at the grocery store. So not big, but just, those little baskets you might carry with you. And the price was going to be somewhere about $20 a basket. Great price. And there was an enormous section of old cookbooks and a lot of the old community cookbooks that I love to collect. And lots of old cooking pamphlets, that old packaged goods companies, baking soda, flour companies would put out in the 30s and 40s. A treasure trove of material, which is very unusual. I usually don't get to select from inventory like this. So, as I've shared with you in another podcast, what happens to me in places like this is I get overloaded with the details. My husband is amazing. He can see every single thing. If we go to an antique store, he's a wonderful person to go with because he sees all the details. Whereas I just see the big picture. So I was attending this estate sale on a Friday morning, so he couldn't go with me. So I had to do my best. And meanwhile, there's other people, so I'm in a hurry to try to get what I want before somebody else snaps it up. So I tried to be as systematic as possible. And there were, three bookshelves. And then there were huge stacks of pamphlets and cookbooks stacked on top of those bookshelves. And then there were 2 big card tables with more cartons of stuff. So there was a lot of material to go through. So I was not very discerning. I just started throwing stuff in my basket. I got so much good stuff, so we're definitely going to have a good time in future podcasts as we go through it. So I had my big basket of stuff, and then there was more. And then they wound up having some old stamp albums. My husband likes stamps, and he knew somebody that would want those albums. So I wound up getting a lot of stuff. I got, 2 baskets of books. I got some old stamp albums that we're giving to a friend. And I think all of that came to $47. So I thought it was a phenomenal morning. And what I find is I get really exhausted from this, I think because I'm expending energy in a way I'm not used to, right? There's a lot of people around. There's a lot of activity. I'm trying to assimilate a lot of data at a time because there's so much to look through and I don't want to miss anything. And of course I told Wes all about it. And we decided to go back the next day because he's so much better at looking through a lot of stuff. Like he can see the jewels in the haystack. I just mixed 2 metaphors, right? He can see the needle in the haystack better than I can. So I don't remember when I picked this stuff up, whether it was on my first foray into the estate sale or if I found this with Wes. But there was cottage cheese related materials. And what you may not know if you don't watch TikTok is cottage cheese is having its moment. It is turning into a very hip and trendy food. There's a guy on TikTok called the Dip King, and he makes all kind of blended concoctions with cottage cheese as a base because cottage cheese is high in protein. And then there's the new wave of cottage cheese toast, not to be confused with the horrible Weight Watchers cheese Danish of my youth, which was basically a piece of tasteless, skinny bread toasted with a 1/4 cup of cottage cheese, of course non-fat, sprinkled with a little bit of sweet and low and cinnamon and toasted under the toaster oven or the broiler. That was supposed to be a cheese Danish, so I have talked about cottage cheese on this podcast before in my plus-size diaries and when I've talked about diet cooking back in the 60s and 70s. So wouldn't you know it, in this treasure trove of cookbooks and food-related materials, I found a couple of different cottage cheese pamphlets. So one is Swappin' Good Recipes featuring cottage cheese. And the next one is Glamour Ways with Cottage Cheese. And then there is this magazine from 1966 called Better Diet Methods, with this woman with, of course, the 1966 sort of flipped set hairdo in a Barbie color pink leotard, long sleeve, and tights, filled with lots of horrible information about dieting. So I was going to do a podcast about all of this, thinking I could be kind of snarky and funny. And I found that as I was flipping through all of this stuff, I just was getting mad. Wasn't funny to me. I was thinking, this is my life. This is why I have been so messed up about food, about my body. And sometimes I think it's really funny now, and I mean that authentically. But in that moment when I went to record my cottage cheese episode, I was just mad. I was like, this is terrible. And no wonder it took me so long to learn to love myself, because I was sold that cottage cheese was the answer. And if I would just eat enough cottage cheese, I would get to look like the woman in the pink leotard on the front of the diet magazine. So I'm not saying that the future may not hold a cottage cheese themed episode using these materials, but I wasn't up for recording it last week. Yeah, so that didn't happen. I did find another copy of Laugh Your Calories Away, the Sweet and Low All-Star Recipes by Joey Adams. I actually already own one copy of this book. It is a treasure of sweet and low recipes from the 60s or 70s. Actually, it's from 1970. And God bless the woman who owned this. Her name was Ursula because she wrote her name in the book. She dog-eared a lot of the pages. So I don't know if she actually liked them or not. Perhaps I can share some of those with you. Those don't seem to get me angry like the cottage cheese and the diet magazine did. Honestly, this has been the journey of my life, right? Understanding food and weight and nutrition. And I really thought I could do the cottage cheese episode and it would be funny to me. And it just made my inner child so mad. I do still eat cottage cheese, just so you know. I don't have a bad relationship with it. I just had it for dinner the other night with some delicious cantaloupe. But anyways, I digress. So that was an episode that never happened. And so then I thought, for another random, I would just share with you a little bit about my process of making this podcast. So most of the time, recording these episodes is super easy. I love to talk, and so I just kind of wind myself up and I go. And it's a very sweet process. I have a Blue Yeti microphone that I plug in, and I just go. I don't really need a lot of prep unless I'm reading something. I might have a few notes that I read from. And when I'm recording it, I keep going. So if I make a mistake, I clap twice so there's a spike in the audio, And so I know to edit that piece and return. So each episode takes somewhere between 2.5 and 3 hours to make, which actually is not a lot of time. Some people, especially if they're doing podcasts that involve research, an episode might take them 20 to 40 hours if it needs a lot of research. So I figure 2.5 to 3 hours for each podcast is pretty good. So I record it and then I have to edit it. So I have to listen to everything I've recorded and edit out extraneous noises and the places where I've corrected or changed what I've said. And then I post it. So I record them all in my office. We have a very sweet room in our house that is dedicated as my office. It's where I do all my angel sessions and classes. And I sit here and I talk to you. And there's a window right in front of my desk that I look out. And so I can see the trees in my neighbor's yard, and I see squirrels running on the fence and birds. And so it's really lovely. I have a really sweet view that I look at as I record these episodes for you. So the space where I record them is filled with so much love because I've done thousands of hours of angel sessions and classes here. I'll share with you a sweet story that doesn't start out very sweet. So maybe this will be another random. So we did the random of the cottage cheese. I shared with you a little bit about where I am when I record this. And now I'll share with you a little bit more about my office. So when we bought this house, this office, or this room, had knotty pine paneling. It had sort of been a back porch or a den, and I didn't like it. Originally, my plan had been, I should be clear about that, my plan had been to paint the paneling white. And then I thought it would look kind of like cottage chic. And everyone, including my husband, said, "You can't paint this. This paneling is beautiful." And I hated it. But I went with it. And we had these really big oak bookshelves filled with books. So if you watch any of my YouTube videos or any of my videos prior to 2016, you'll see what the office used to look like. And then what happened is we found out we had mold. And it is not a good thing when that happens. It was awful. And we had to go through remediation, is what it's called, remediation. And basically, we had a company come in and they had to clean every single item in our house of mold spores. It's extensive. And it turned out that ground zero was my office. There had been a window that was leaking in between the paneling and the window, so we couldn't see the leak. We didn't know there was a leak. And as I'm telling you this, I'm realizing this is probably a really horrible story to be sharing for a sleep podcast. So I'm going to rush through the bad part and get to the part that I thought was really lovely. So it was a lot, and I was very overwhelmed. And I wound up calling the Agape Prayer Ministry, which is a wonderful resource. If you ever need help with something, Agape Prayer Ministry, one of their practitioners will do a prayer treatment for you. So I called them and I said, I'm overwhelmed. We're having to completely redo our office and our home. We're in remediation. And I need there to be grace. I need this to work out. I need this to be okay. So this lovely woman starts doing a prayer treatment for me. And affirmative prayer is affirming the highest vision of what is transpiring. So it's a very intuitive practice, and it can go on for many minutes as the practitioner is attuning to the lines of energy and bringing forward this beautiful, powerful prayer. And so at one point in the prayer, she says, and there are angels in the office. There are angels all over the office, and they are helping with this remediation. They're helping with this remodeling. The energy there is beautiful. And in that moment, I was saying to myself, that's right. The angels, they're angels in the office. Completely having forgotten that I had already had several years of working with the angels in this space. I don't know why I had forgotten that in that moment, but there are angels here. This is a sacred space, my office. So to wind up that story, which I didn't think I was going to share with you, we wound up having to completely redo this office. And now it's beautiful. It's just what I want. I have these lilac-colored walls and crown molding, and the energy in this space is so beautiful. And of course there are angels here, because since we moved into this space in 2008, I have done thousands of angel readings and thousands of hours of classes, of 180 plus episodes of this podcast, where the angels are here in this space. And so this podcast is infused with so much angel love for you and for me too. So there's another random for you from my life about about angels in this space where I record the podcast. I guess for another random, I will share with you how I'm in a place right now where I don't have a lot of drive to accomplish much. If you've ever sort of taken a class with me or had a session with me, you'll know that I often speak of the duality of being in practitioner mode and earth girl mode. So when I'm teaching a class or facilitating a session, that's practitioner mode for me. I call in the light, and I'm very focused on holding space for other people. And then when I'm not working, I go into earth girl mode. And that's the part of me that goes grocery shopping and gets upset and, as a human being. And my joy space really, especially in the past, 10 years or so, has been in practitioner mode. I love my earth girl life as well. But a lot of my juice came from my work. What's been so interesting in the last few months is I have been spending much more of my joy time in earth girl mode. I still have joy time in practitioner mode, so that hasn't stopped. But I find that I'm more engaged in my earth girl expression than I have been in a really long time. And I think that's a good thing. So I find that I'm not as inclined to be focusing on my work right now. Again, I think that's totally okay, but it's just a shift. Wes and I have been going on these little mini adventures. We don't really take vacation, but, to spend a Saturday afternoon wandering around an antique show or an estate sale, to have these little mini adventures. We are having so much fun. And so I think that my energy that I might have used for work, I'm now using elsewhere. This whole weekend, I was planning on sitting down and recording a podcast. I was going to get my stuff ready to announce my angel cards. I have a new class to prepare for that I want to announce in the next week. I just didn't want to do any of it. And at the best of times, I'm not terribly driven. But right now, I am on a metaphoric inner tube, just floating down a river, having the best time, not feeling like I have to do anything at all. And I have a deep, deep contentment with my life right now, which is so beautiful. I had spent so much of my life wanting my life to be different than what it was, or feeling like I needed to accomplish something, or being driven, or there was something missing. And right now, I'm just so deeply contented. It's not that everything is perfect, but like I have this deep acceptance of what is. And I feel so blessed. I feel so blessed in my life. And so this contentment is creating a space of quiet within me that is really beautiful, to just enjoy the day, to just let the day be what it is. I've shared with you that my husband grows tomatoes, and we've been giving out tomatoes to people. There's this very sweet little antique mall in downtown Vallejo that we stop by on Saturdays when we go to the farmer's market, and we brought the owner some tomatoes from our garden, and he was delighted. And it's just such a joy to be meeting lovely people as we go about our travels, to share our tomatoes with people, to find random cookbooks at an estate sale, to record these episodes for you, and to be reminded that the angels are here right now, that practitioner in that moment felt the angels and reminded me that they are here. So I get to remind you that they are here. And so this is really a rambly, random episode, but it feels like this is what I needed to do to sort of get the wheels turning again, because I was in this, actually it was a very sweet space of stillness the past week, but I hadn't been able to record an episode. Every time I came to record it, I felt like I didn't know what to talk about. And sometimes it's okay to talk about nothing. This is conversation, right? I always use the metaphor of, if we were having lunch, we would talk about a lot of random things. I might tell you about my cottage cheese pamphlets that I picked up at the estate sale. And then I might tell you about how Wes and I are gathering up all our tomatoes to share with people. And I might reminisce with you about the time that the practitioner at the Agape Spiritual Center reminded me that angels are in my office. Because of course they are. Where else would they be? And it's these sweet moments that make up life. Life isn't always these big, shining things that are goals attained or things we're aspiring to. They're the ordinary moments of, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Are you a breakfast person? I don't even know this about you. I am. I have a smoothie every morning for breakfast. I use Shakeology by Beachbody. I've used it for years and I love it. And I can tell you more about my relationship with it at some point, but I feel better when I have it. And I use cashew milk and a bunch of spinach and some frozen bananas and ice. And that is my breakfast every single morning. And if I don't have that for breakfast, I don't feel as good during the day. I've always been a breakfast person. If I don't have breakfast, I don't feel well. see another random. If we were having lunch, we might talk about breakfast. Because why wouldn't we talk about food if we were together? I love the conversation of food. And perhaps to wrap it up, and maybe this will be its own episode at some point, let me share with you the recipes that Ursula had dog-eared in the book, Laugh Your Calories Away, the Sweet and Low All-Star Recipes by Joey Adams. And this is a compilation of recipes by celebrities that include sweet and low. I promise you, I do not believe that the celebrities actually created these recipes. I believe it is a publicist. But what the heck? Here's a couple of the recipes that have been dog-eared. Barbara Walters sweet rolls. I love a good sweet roll. It does involve 4.5 packets of sweet and low. At that point, I would have just used sugar. We have Angie Dickinson's Chicken Italiana, which involves 2 packets of sweet and low. We have Jacqueline Suzanne's Sukiyaki, 2 packets of sweet and low required. I don't know why this makes me laugh. We have Alan Alda's Spice Cupcakes. And this involves 12 packets of sweet and low. I can taste the metallic taste of the sweet and low just even as I think of that. Hope Hampton's Sponge Cupcakes. I don't know who she is. They say she is one of the all-time glamour girls. I do not know who she is, but probably if it was 1970, I would know her. She was probably one of those people who'd be on Dinah Shore or Merv Griffin. Eliza Kashi, again, I don't know who she is. She's making vanilla cookies with 4 packets of sweet and low. Burt Bacharach has a Hawaiian parfait, which is not dog-eared, but it does involve 7 packets of sweet and low. Okay, I'll share this recipe with you because I'm sure you want to know what Burt Bacharach's Hawaiian parfait is. 1 cup of canned pineapple chunks unsweetened. 2 cups raw rhubarb diced. You lost me at rhubarb, not a rhubarb fan, but maybe you are, so we'll continue. A dash of salt, red food coloring. Everything is better with red food coloring. 7 packets of sweet and low. 1 package of orange gelatin. Dietetic, of course, because they weren't going to co-brand with Jell-O, right? So it has to be gelatin. 1 cup of hot water and a 1/3 cup of non-fat dry milk. Okay, and then you somehow put this whole concoction together. How much do you want to bet that Burt Bacharach never tasted this in his life? Just as a little trivia, Burt Bacharach wrote Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. And what the world needs now is love, sweet love. Okay, and now you can just sing those songs in your head for the rest of the day or night. All right, we did it, my friends. We did it. I broke the log jam of recording episodes, and I have recorded this rambling, random, we're out to lunch podcast episode for you. And even though I did talk a little bit about cottage cheese, it did not bring up my upset from my earlier years. I'm in a good mood. I'm feeling happy and grateful for our time together. So I love you very much. I wish you the sweetest of dreams. I hope that you have a good rest. And we'll talk again soon. Thank you so much. You're the best.